planning protests as the gun debate heats up. And we're also getting new reaction from the White House at this hour. It's Monday. It's President's Day. Good Monday morning. Brand new hour here in America's Newsroom. I'm Bill Hemmer, and a big welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
How was the first hour, okay?
It went pretty well.
Got through it?
The split gone, yes.
Nicely done. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Alicia Acuna. In for Sandra Smith. Organizers are mobilizing students and teachers to conduct sit-ins, walkouts, marches to protest gun violence in schools. Survivors of last week's shooting say it's time to make schools safer.
People are saying that it's not time to talk about gun control, and we can respect that. Here's a time, March 24th, in every single city. We are going to be marching together as students begging for our lives. This isn't about the GOP, this isn't about the Democrats, this is about the adults. We feel neglected, and at this point, you're either with us or against us.
Well, meanwhile, the White House planning a listening session that'll happen later this week as the students call for action. President Trump last night saying he supports changes to some background checks. So what's that story?
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington. What is the White House saying, Griff?
Good morning, guys. You know, we've seen this movie before, a push for gun control following tragic events, and it loses steam and nothing gets done in Washington. But maybe because of these students, things will be different this time. They rallied all weekend. They took to the airways in full force. And after just a few days of intense pressure, the White House announces the president will hold a listening session with students on Wednesday. And last night, the White House issuing a statement saying the president spoke to Senator Cornyn on Friday about this bipartisan bill to strengthen the FBI's database system, saying that while discussions are ongoing and revisions are being considered, the president is supportive of efforts to improve the federal background check system. Then Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah elaborated a little more this morning.
Right now, you have a bit of a patchwork in which local communities and states give information to, one system. Our budget has an increase for 200 personnel to help staff that system. We want to make sure that the background check process is fully staffed, that all information gets in.
Very interesting. We'll see what Senator Cornyn has to say perhaps later today or this week.
And Griff, what the students are doing, this is unlike anything I've seen in the aftermath of a school shooting in this country. What's the likelihood that these students are going to succeed?
Good question, but it would be a big deal if it did, and the rallies continue tonight. The real test is whether the momentum lasts through next month's March and all the way to the midterms as they take this message to state capitals in D.C., targeting elected officials and special interest groups.
Our elected officials need to get together, overcome their political differences, and get some things done because they need to save the future of our country. And the future of our country are those children that are currently dying because politicians refuse to take action and continue to take money from these special interest groups.
No, the NRA has not commented since the shooting, but it's also important to remember, Alicia, that President Trump has been supportive of gun control measures in the past. We talked about it on the campaign trail. Maybe, just maybe, this time, things will be different. We'll see.
We will have to see. Griff Jenkins in Washington. Thanks, Griff.
Questions for the FBI, too, right now. Feeling the heat over the massacre in Florida, failing to investigate warnings that crews had guns and wanted to kill. Stephen Hayes, editor-in-chief, Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor. Steve, good morning to you. We'll get to the Russia matter in a moment here, but there are two incidents that we know of for the FBI. Well, when an American citizen calls the FBI, I mean, that is quite a step. I mean, you used to think about local police or even the superintendent or the principal. In addition, police were called to his house 20 times. Who knows what the school knew or anyone else in that community, but I mean, it really stuns you. And I think it leaves you asking the question, what can we do when something is so obviously disturbed in society?
Well, this really is a sort of a wake-up call. I mean, this was a kid who seemed to be holding a red flag himself and was waving it at every possible minute. You have this slogan, if you see something, say something. And in this case, many people did say something. But then it's up to the authorities to actually act on what they've been told, whether you're talking about the FBI and federal law enforcement, whether you're talking about local law enforcement, the schools, and others. And obviously, in this case, this was somebody who just didn't get the attention that he needed early on that might have prevented something like this.
Does Christopher Wray survive this at the FBI? If he does, I imagine there's a hearing in Congress that It's got his name all over it.
Yeah, I think he should be asked hard questions about what the field offices in Florida did or did not do in this case, and have to answer those questions before Congress and in front of the public. That said, this is pretty distant from him. He wasn't in office when those calls came in. He'll have to explain the processes and procedures.
Fair point.
But I think it's hard to lay this on him.
Fair point there. Okay, now let's talk about Russia. Weekly Standard editorial. The closing paragraph goes like this on screen. A real Trump rally regularly attracted 15,000 Floridians. A fake Russian organized Trump rally attracted 15. If the rest of their efforts were similarly impotent, the red troll army starts to look not so much ominous, but humorous. It's hard to credit that particular Ruski-funded endeavor with having any impact at all, let alone swinging an election. The Ruskies. What's your take?
Yeah, we had our Eric Felton take a look at the indictments and sort of dig beyond what was the first set of headlines that came out over the last few days, and he looked at one aspect of what the Russians were trying to do, which was get people out on the streets, engaged in political activities, actual campaign-style events. And what he found was that it just didn't work. And he looked in particular on August 20th at a time when the Russians apparently tried to organize these kinds of rallies and campaigns, and in effect nobody showed up. Very few people showed up, and what Eric did was contrast that with the broader Trump rallies, where every time Donald Trump would show up in Florida, he would attract these massive crowds. So on that narrow slice, it doesn't appear that the Russians were very effective.
Adam Schiff's not going to let go of this. You don't think so, right? I mean, this.
No.
He's been on it for more than a year. He said this on CNN on Sunday. Just watch here.
This is a president who claims vindication anytime someone sneezes. The Trump campaign, and indeed candidate Trump himself, was very witting of what was going on. Indeed, the whole country was.
Let's wait and see what we hear from him next. The president tweeted this. Finally, little Adam Schiff, he says, the leaking monster of no control is now blaming, go ahead and put it up, guys, is now blaming the Obama administration for Russian meddling in the 2016 election. He's finally right about something. Obama was president, knew of the threat and did nothing. Thank you, Adam. John Sununu said 20 minutes ago that he expects the turn in this story to go toward Clapper and Brennan and President Obama. Do you see it that way as to what they did or knew at the time?
Well, I mean, you still have James Clapper out today saying that he thinks another shoe is going to drop. If he has this information, he ought to let us know what it is. He's certainly not been shy about talking about it in public over the past year. Look, Adam Schiff there in that soundbite that you played was conflating two things. Of course, the Trump campaign was witting in the sense of encouraging, President Trump himself, encouraging these leaks, encouraging the hacks of Hillary Clinton's campaign, asking the Russians to make this stuff public. He was doing that. He held press conferences to do that right after the Republican National Convention. At the same time, that's not what this indictment is about. This indictment is about specific things. It's about the trolling, it's about the social media presence, and it's about organizing these activities. And I think on this narrow slice, as I say, this is not the collusion that people like Adam Schiff were talking about from the beginning. It's early. We'll learn more. If anything that we've learned about Robert Mueller's investigation is that he's running a very tight ship. We haven't heard leaks about these things before they happen. Perhaps he's got a lot more. Perhaps he's got more about the kind of hacking that Adam Schiff was referring to there.
I thought the key word on Friday from Rosenstein was unwitting.
Correct.
Unwitting Americans. Do you agree on that?
I do. Look, on those two subjects, that was the key word. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have more, that he's not investigating, that he won't learn more. But these 37 pages, these indictments of 13 Russians, that was the key word. And on these two subjects, I just think it's not as big as people had suspected it might be.
Okay, last point here, last tweet here on meddling on screen. I never said Russia did not meddle in the election, writes the president. I said it may be Russia or China, another country or group, or it may be a 400-pound genius sitting in bed and playing with his computer. Remember that line from the first debate. The Russian hoax was that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. It never did. Last comment on all this, Steve.
Yeah, I don't agree with the president there. I think he's said and implied several times that this whole thing was a hoax, not just the collusion narrative, but the whole thing was a hoax. You remember when he talked to Vladimir Putin, and Putin said, "I didn't do it," and the president then conveyed those words to the American public, saying he said that he didn't believe it. He said very strongly that he didn't do this. I think the president has left the impression repeatedly that Russian meddling itself was a hoax, and it wasn't a hoax. There was Russian meddling. We'll learn how great and how significant an impact
but
it had.
The logic is the reason why he hasn't called for an investigation is that he doesn't want to impugn the election of last year.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly what he's doing. Having said that, Russian meddling is a real thing. We'll learn more about what was involved here, but we need to learn from 2016 to take cautionary steps about 2018 and 2020.
Appreciate the analysis. Thank you, Steve. Stephen Hayes there in Washington. Thank you.
Fox News alert, ISIS claiming responsibility for a deadly church shooting. The scene unfolding at a Russian Orthodox church in a predominantly Muslim region. Russian news sources say a local man in his 20s fired at churchgoers yesterday as they were leaving afternoon service. 5 women were killed. The gunman was shot and killed at the scene by police. His wife has been detained for questioning.
Right about 10 minutes past the hour now. Meanwhile, a manhunt underway after a masked gunman shooting 4 people outside of a restaurant in Texas. What we're learning about the suspect today. Plus, there's this.
This is an opportunity for the American people, maybe our last real opportunity to create an immigration system that's lawful, that ends the lawlessness, the illegality, and serves the national interest.
Dreamers facing an urgent deadline after the Senate fails to act on immigration. Can they get a compromise done? Our panel debates.
March 5th, rather, is the deadline. Israel's prime minister feeling the heat as more Israeli officials arrested on charges of corruption. What Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying about that this morning. 15 past the hour, 4 people injured, including a 6-year-old boy, when a masked gunman opened fire outside of a steakhouse in Texas yesterday. The suspect's still at large. Police believe they do not believe it's a random shooting. The victims are all from one family, 2 of them listed now in critical condition.
And the president's absolutely committed. Our whole administration is to work with Republicans in the House and the Senate, to work with Democrats in the House and the Senate, and find a way to build this wall and to solve the DACA problem and reform our immigration system.
Vice President Mike Pence speaking about immigration reform while touring the Rio Grande Valley sector of the southern border. This comes as a battle over border security and DACA stalled in the Senate last week, which threatens to complicate a looming fiscal year spending bill. Our panel now, Katie Pavlich is an editor for townhall.com and Fox News contributor. Marjorie Clifton is a former Obama campaign consultant and principal at Clifton Consulting. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Good morning.
Good morning. And before we get started, I want to play a portion of an interview Rush Limbaugh gave to Chris Wallace this weekend. He brings up an idea, and I'd like to get both your take on this. Listen here.
I would be willing right here to support an effort to grant permanent citizenship to whatever number of illegal immigrants there are in the country tomorrow. If you will make as part of the deal, they can't vote for 15 to 25 years. And if they will agree to that, then I'll grant them amnesty.
Katie, that makes sense to you?
Well, Rush Limbaugh does have a point, but that's not a serious proposal that is on the table legislatively. Look, Democrats are never going to allow a Republican president to claim victory on amnesty because it threatens their liberal voting base. They believe that the Hispanic vote is theirs for the taking, and if they allow Republicans to dig in and offer that community and some wins on the illegal immigration front and the amnesty front, that definitely pulls away from their political perspective. But I just want to say, in terms of this DACA debate, we've gone from trying to fix DACA to overall now doing comprehensive immigration reform, and we're learning again that it is more complicated than everyone has let on. And from the White House's perspective, they've already put their compromises on the table, and it's time for the House to do their job.
And Marjorie, I just want to get your take on what you heard Mr. Limbaugh say.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Republicans feel like they are truly doing right by the people that they're serving, they shouldn't be afraid of people voting. So I think his statement speaks highly of how they're treating the immigrant population and the fear that they would vote against them because they've been treated improperly.
And the illegal immigrant population. I think it's funny how you keep mixing those terms.
Well, actually, what they're talking about are people that would be lawfully in the country because
they're
of the
illegal
path
now.
to citizenship.
They're not legal.
But if they were in the country and in the terms they're talking about, they would be legal. So that's what we're talking about.
And Democrats won't allow it because they want the votes for their party, so it's also political for them.
Well, let me bring up this tweet that was put up by Senator Charles Schumer. Can we have that? Yes. One problem, even if Democrats would take that deal, General Kelly wouldn't.
I don't think Americans would take that deal. Look, the Americans for a very long time, for decades and decades, are been fed up with the illegal immigration system and the way that it prioritizes those who come into the country, breaking the laws of the United States, and then not prioritizing people who come here legally. This is about ending the illegal immigration problem and getting rid of the magnets that allow people to continue to come here. And that's where Republicans are drawing the line by saying, look, we've been here before. We've offered amnesty and return for border security. We haven't gotten it, and we're not going to go there again.
Okay, I only have about a minute left. Congress cannot seem to get out of its own way, right? The Democrats shut down the government for 3 days in January over immigration. Republican senators didn't get anywhere last week. Immigration reform fails again and again. The president has made it clear he will not sign anything into law that does not end chain migration and the visa lottery system. That said, Congress is going to try again, and both sides acknowledging immigration will likely be added to the omnibus spending bill. What are the chances? And Marjorie, let's start with you.
Well, we've got 14 members of the Senate who are actually Republican members of the Senate that have dissented on the last go-round of the bill. I think the challenge we've got is an environment that is not a positive one for compromise on either party. We have, as evidenced by my counterpart here, a lot of fear and a lack of understanding of what immigration is really about.
I'm from a border state.
Lawful.
I think I understand.
So am I. I'm in Texas.
Fine. Right.
And
so let's not accuse
Katie, I want to give you a chance to jump in there real quick.
It's a lot about, but it is a lot about fear.
Absolutely
and this is not about demonizing.
It's about embracing the law and allowing legal immigrants to be prioritized above those who come here illegally. And it's about enforcing the law and making sure that people don't come here in the future to break our laws. So don't accuse me of having fear over this when I just want people to follow the law like everybody else who comes here legally.
Yeah,
ladies,
so there's a lot of emotion around
Ladies, we got to end it there. We'll continue this another time. Marjorie Clifton, Katie Pavlich, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, 20 minutes past the hour. The U.S. pressure campaign against North Korea continues as Rex Tillerson reveals more about that campaign.
A threat to the American people by a regime like this is not acceptable. And the president's meeting his responsibilities as commander-in-chief of asking our military and Secretary Mattis at the Defense Department to ensure we are prepared for anything.
Well, will there be a face-to-face meeting with Kim Jong-un and what he says about the potential for conflict with that rogue regime? Coming up.
Plus, the Russian indictments raising questions about over what to do about the next U.S. election. Reaction next.
I've known all along that Russia tried to subvert our 2016 election, and they're going to do the same thing in 2020 and every election thereafter, unless and until we do what the indictment said, which is we view this as America being the victim.
Israeli police arresting associates of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a growing corruption scandal. 7 members of his inner political circle on corruption charges just days after police recommended Netanyahu be indicted on separate bribery and fraud charges in 2 separate cases. Netanyahu calling the latest arrests a contrived bubble that will burst.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, long interview on 60 Minutes, signaling North Korea is open to talks with the U.S. If Pyongyang initiates the dialogue, the U.S. may do the same. And that's not all he said either. Rich Edson live at the State Department now. Rich, good morning there. In the past, this is what North Korea wants, right? Face-to-face talks. How real is this possibility?
face-to-face discussions, Bill, but the problem is the United States wants North Korea to discuss surrendering its ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs, and that's something that there has been no indication of yet. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has been saying that he is willing to talk with North Korea. They want to negotiate, but North Korea has to show a willingness to at least discuss those programs, and North Korea has rejected that idea. In fact, Kim Jong-un has just spent the last year launching ballistic missiles and developing that program, with some analysts saying that North Korea's ballistic missiles now have the range to hit U.S. cities on the East Coast. The U.S. and North Korea have kept open lines of communication, especially regarding Americans in North Korean prisons, though the U.S. is still trying to isolate North Korea and trying to ensure that North Korea and convince North Korea to come to the table and discuss those weapons programs. The State Department is leading what the administration calls its pressure campaign. It's even considering a naval blockade of North Korea to ensure that countries and others aren't trying to help North Korea circumvent a number of the sanctions that international bodies have put in place. The administration is trying to convince countries to halt their business and diplomatic ties with North Korea, and the State Department and officials here claim that that campaign is working. But this is all ongoing while North Korea continues what some have dubbed its charm offensive at the Winter Olympics in South Korea. Analysts say that is simply just an attempt by North Korea to try to drive a wedge between the United States and South Korea. And analysts say they are looking to see after the Olympics if the United States and South Korea continue with those joint military exercises that they suspended during these Olympic Games, Bill.
March is going to be very interesting. Yeah. Rich, thank you so much. Rich Edson there at the State Department today. Nice to see you. Alicia.
Ambassador Nikki Haley putting Iran on notice.
Iran believes that they have been given a pass. It is incumbent on the international community to show not only are they not being given a pass, but all of these actions have to stop and stop immediately.
Her warning to the world about Iran and its influence in the Middle East. General Jack Keane is here.
Also, Alicia, questions about the FBI matter as we wait a status hearing on the Florida shooter. And we're hearing from the family who cared for him after his mother died last October.
Nothing I can say will heal them. We hurt for them deeply.
Very much so. We're devastated.
We are learning more details now about the Florida school shooting suspect as the family took in that killer just into their home only 3 months ago are now talking. This is the FBI comes under fire for failing to follow up on at least 2 warnings. One was very specific. The couple who took him in after his mother died last fall explaining the guns he brought with him when he moved in.
Before he moved in, one of the stipulations is he had to get a gun safe. And we got a gun safe on the way back from Lantana from moving his stuff to our house.
And he didn't have free access to this gun safe?
No. I thought I had the only key to the gun safe.
And had he ever asked you beforehand to use a gun, to take it out of the safe?
He asked twice. Once I said yes because he wanted to clean it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know which gun he wanted to clean, but he said he wanted to clean a gun. I said okay. And another time he asked and I told him no.
John Yanarelli is a former FBI special agent. He's with us from Arizona. Sir, good morning to you, and thank you. Thank you for coming back here. I wanted to read you a little bit from the FBI statement on Friday afternoon. Here's how it read in part on screen. On January 5th, 2018, a person close to Nicholas Cruz contacted the FBI's public access line, the PAL, tip line to report concerns about him. The caller provided information about Cruz's gun ownership, desire to kill people, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential of him conducting a school shooting. Now, that is pretty specific.
It sure is, Bill.
What would prevent the FBI from moving on that?
Well, Bill, while it's specific, the fact of the matter is there's nothing there directly a violation of law. Under the law, to be arrested for making a threat, it has to be a specific threat. I want to kill such and such person, or I'm going to go out on such and such day. That said, That lead should have been sent to Miami. Agents should have been dispatched out to interview this person, at the very least, just to see what else he might say.
That takes us to point number 2. Back on screen, the statement continues to read the following. Under established protocols, the information provided by the caller should have been assessed as a potential threat to life. The information then should have been forwarded to the Miami field office where appropriate investigative steps would have been taken. So that did not happen. I think the question is why? Why not?
It's a tragic situation, and frankly, it's unconscionable. For some reason, that information didn't go down to Miami. Whether the call center received it and there was a technical glitch or someone dropped the ball. That's why Director Wray has said he wants this investigated, he wants it fixed, because I'm concerned not just did that not go down, what else is out there? We have to make sure every one of those is being addressed to keep people safe.
Okay, so these are the 2 that we know about. And had it been relayed to Miami, perhaps they would have picked up on the fact that police have been called to his house 20 times. I get what you're saying. There's no specific threat. No crime had been committed. But would that not have raised flags for so many people? I mean, for an American citizen to call the FBI, right? I mean, you can see him calling the sheriff's department. You can see him calling the school. But this is the FBI, and these, based on what we know, these are just regular citizens. That's a big step for most people, John. You agree?
It is a big step, but it's also a big step that thousands of people do. This call center is set up just for that reason. We've been telling people for 17 years now, if you see something, say something, and that's what people are doing. What I want to ensure is that people are not discouraged from calling because there was a single mistake made. Tragic mistake that should have never happened. Maybe it would have made a difference, maybe not. We won't know. But we want people to call. We want FBI agents to be enabled to do their job. Unfortunately, agents in Florida were never given the chance.
When do you think the FBI explains this, John?
I imagine people are looking at this right now, and they're going to have an answer shortly. Director Wray understands that the FBI is under fire from all sides these days. This has to be addressed immediately, and I think it's just a short matter of time before we hear the answers.
Rick Scott, the governor in Florida, jumped on this right away. He said the following: we constantly promote see something, say something, as you just mentioned. And a courageous person did just that to the FBI, and the FBI failed to act. See something, say something is an incredibly important tool, and people must have confidence in the follow-through from law enforcement. The FBI director needs to resign, end quotes.
I don't see how.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't see how Director Wray resigning solves anything at all. Director Wray's been in office a short period of time, and under his leadership, we've already seen changes in the FBI, changes in FBI leadership, which is exactly what this comes down to. Somewhere along the line, someone leading the operation, whether it be high up or on the scene, needs to ensure all of this is being followed. If there's a problem, it needs to be fixed. Director Wray's shown that he's the man that is willing to make change in the FBI.
Were you as stunned on Friday afternoon as so many others were when that news broke?
I was not only stunned, I was heartbroken. I will tell you, after my 21 years in the FBI, I have yet to meet an agent that does not want to go out every day and help protect people. I know there's agents in Miami in every office that would have loved to have received that sort of information, the chance to protect people. It's an unfortunate situation.
Imagine what sort of gut punch it was to those folks in Florida, too, and I know you do, John. Thank you for coming on today. John Iannarelli there from Arizona. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
New concerns over the possibility of Russian interference in the upcoming November midterm elections after Special Counsel Robert Mueller's recent indictments against Russians for presidential election meddling. Peter Ducey is live in Washington. Peter, what's the vulnerability election officials are most concerned about ahead of the midterms?
It's exposing personal information that voters share with their states.
I think most of us have come to the conclusion the biggest risk at the moment might be the voter registration lists, because those are the ones that are most frequently online and managed online in a variety of different ways.
Secretaries of state from across the country have descended on D.C. over the long weekend to strategize about the best ways to minimize interference in the midterm elections in 2018. And they got to see part of the Russian playbook on the first day of their conference.
There was one piece of information in the Mueller indictment. I mean, there's a lot there, but there's one that I thought was particularly relevant to this discussion, which is that was $1 million a month operation. So that gives me an idea of the resources that we're working against.
And since most of that money was spent on propaganda, that is what secretaries of state seem most concerned about stopping. Alicia.
And what about the feds? Have federal officials offered to start administrating elections instead of the states?
No, the DHS secretary briefed these state officials in D.C. this weekend, and there was no talk yet about a federal election takeover.
The main thing that she indicated to us is she's open, willing, and able to work with us at the state level. She wants to do so, and she has absolutely no desire or no intention to take over elections and to run elections from the federal level down to the state level. That was the thing we were the most enthusiastic about hearing from Secretary Nielsen.
Secretary Merrill's Alabama is one of the 21 states that Russian hackers tried to breach in 2016, but he insists there is no evidence that any ballots there were ever changed. Alicia.
Thanks, Peter. Peter Ducey in D.C.
Vice President Mike Pence now responding to Joy Behar, ABC co-host of the show The View, after she mocked his claims that he talks to Jesus. He said this.
But I do think I'm a very typical American. I think people of all different faith traditions cherish their faith in God, and to have ABC have a forum that spoke in such meaning terms, I think it's evidence of how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people.
This past week, Behar accused the vice president of mental illness because he listens to Jesus. Her remarks were in response to a reality TV star and former White House staffer Omarosa, who told her fellow Celebrity Big Brother contestants that they should be worried about Pence because he, quote, thinks Jesus tells him to say things, end quote. Alicia.
A status hearing for the accused Florida shooter now underway. Nicholas Cruz is not there, but his attorney is asking for a continuation. We will bring you any developments from the courtroom.
Also, the president